Hi. We haven't worked out that transition yet. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of What is that pattern on his shirt? I got asked this morning, what's on your shirt? And I'm like, I don't know, a pattern of some kind. So we should have like a running poll or something. You know, what do you think is on that man's shirt? I've been waiting to wear this shirt, but I've had the black and white background, so I didn't want to just be like a floating head, that you couldn't see anything else of. These are the things I think about in preparation for my sermon, among other things. I hope you all are doing well, and it's really nice to see here in Santa Cruz, at least. I don't know where you're tuning in from, but in Santa Cruz, the sun is beginning to shine. And I am almost a little bit embarrassed to admit how much the weather affects my mood. And I don't know if it's just the stay-at-home stuff, but man, when it's cloudy, it's just, I feel a little bit more down. But now the sun's coming out. It really does feel like spring. And there is a spring in my step as a result. Yeah, stay at home. I hope you're having an opportunity to maybe do some things that you didn't have time for previously, hobbies and whatnot, spending your time at home, maybe taking up cooking, or as I did yesterday, cutting pieces of wood, and putting them in the baseboard hole that was there in our house. That's not an analogy. I literally cut pieces of wood yesterday and installed baseboard in my house, which made me feel really good, except that it was a little crooked, so I kind of had a moment, and I'm trying to put the baseboard in, and had this air gun, or it's not an air gun, a nail gun, yeah, but powered by the air, okay? There's a compressor. I borrowed this compressor and a air nail gun. Is that the right term? That feels really violent. Okay, whatever. All right, air nail gun. It's like, that kind of sound. And so I'm installing it, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, the compressor, stopped making a sound. And I'm like, oh, no, I broke the compressor. How did I break the compressor? So I turned it off and on again, and nothing happened. It was broken. And I was like, I had finished, 4 out of the 6 boards or something. So I just had 2 boards left. And I'm like, no, I don't want to leave this, undone. And so I couldn't figure out the compressor thing. So I'm like, oh, man. So I'm like, I guess I got to do it by hand. But I didn't have any nails. Because, who has baseboard nails lying around their house? So I took the nails of the nail gun, and they're kind of glued together a little bit. So I pried those apart with pliers, and then I hand tapped the nails in. But for some reason, that didn't work very well. So I put the nails in, through the baseboard, right where I would have put the nail gun thing, and they went into the wall. But then the baseboard did not stick to the wall. So then I thought, I need to be on the studs, which I felt was a pretty studly thought myself. So I found the studs, and then I'm like, I'll put the baseboard nails in line with the baseboard and the stud, and I'll do that. And it still didn't work. I couldn't get them to stick in. So that was a bit frustrating. So then I tried some angled nail situation, and so I'm like, I got a little frustrated. And in the middle of my bedroom, I left the compressor and the nail gun and my hammer and a couple of nails. And I walked out, and I told Lindsay, I'm like, I need to take a break. And she's like, okay. She was so super nice about it. I'm like, it doesn't look good. She's like, it looks great. I'm like, it's all sticking out and it's weird. And she was super encouraging. But I left, and I was like, oh. And then I was texting with my brother, and he was like, oh, yeah, no, the compressor just stops making sound when it's not sucking air anymore. It's not broken. I was like, what? I just finished doing all of that by hand. And he, of course, really enjoyed that. He enjoyed that too much, I feel. I'm like, man, I spent all that time bending over and tapping the nails and everything, but so. Anyway, I hope you're picking up new hobbies and are actually successful at them. But I am looking forward to going home and trying to fix things a little bit. Oh man, doing things you never done before. It's quite the journey. Well, hey, this morning we are going to continue our Bible study that we were doing before we went to live streaming and all of the shelter-in-place orders happened. We were making our way slowly, but making our way through the Gospel of Mark, and I intend to pick it up where we left off. And so we're in Mark chapter 5. If you have your Bibles, I would encourage you to turn there. You know, when I had this idea earlier this year to go through the Gospel of Mark, in the back of my mind, I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we made our way through the book of Mark and during Easter, if I could work the timing out somehow so that we could read about the resurrection in the book of Mark during Easter. And as you can see, we only made it to Mark chapter 5. So even without COVID-19, I think I would have missed it by a couple of months. So that just kind of goes to show you how ambitious I am. I'm like, yeah, we can go through the whole book in, just a month or two. Not going to happen, but that's okay. Mark chapter 5. The reason why I wanted to go back through the Gospel of Mark, it's not just because I'm a completionist, although I do have a hard time, even if I'm watching a bad movie, I have to finish it. I have to sit there and just finish the whole thing. I have seen so many Christmas Hallmark movies all the way to the end, only because there's something inside of me that's like, you got to finish it. Got to follow through. That's not the only reason why we're going back to the Gospel of Mark, but I want to know how I can be thinking about this time that we're all living in, the way that Jesus would think about these things. And so I really want to dedicate ourselves to studying the life of Jesus and keeping in mind the time that we're living in right now, and any little tidbit, any truth, any perspective, any action that we can discover in the life of Jesus that can help us navigate this time now. Because, the name Christian, it means little Christ. So how can I be a Christian in this time? And I figure reading about the life of Jesus is a great way to do that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the life of Jesus, and we're going to ask the Lord, can you help us be like you in this time? All right. So Mark chapter 5, we are actually going to get through the whole chapter. I promise you. We're going to get through the whole thing. And we're even going to dip into Mark chapter 4 a little bit. So we're going to go back in order to go forwards, a preacher's classic move. But to understand Mark, you really have to understand Genesis. You know what I mean? So let's go to Genesis. Don't tempt me. All right. So just to remind you of kind of where we are in the life of Jesus. Mark chapter 5 is still very early on in Jesus' introduction to the world. People are really just starting to get to know him. They're just beginning to understand that he has power, he has insight, he teaches in a way that nobody's ever taught before, the way that he understands the scriptures and the way that he helps people understand God's intent for their life is like nothing they've ever experienced before. They're just starting to be introduced to Jesus. I think it's helpful for me as I'm reading this to remember that these people that we're reading about did not know the end of the story. They did not know there was even a cross in the future for Jesus. They did not understand that Jesus was going to die and that he was going to be raised from the dead. They didn't really understand the bigger picture purpose of the reason that Jesus came. For these folks, all that they knew was that there's this guy, he can heal people, he's teaching amazingly, and they wanted to follow him. They wanted more. And that's kind of where we are in the story. And even the disciples, who, there's an argument to be made that they, even to the very end, after Jesus rose from the dead and then finally explained everything to them, that was the moment that they really began to understand stuff. But all throughout the Gospels, we see the disciples, shaking their heads, and then privately saying, like, I had no idea what that meant, Jesus. Can you explain that to me? So Jesus is still kind of introducing himself to the world. Mark chapter 5 and a little bit of chapter 4 is an incredible chapter because it shows us in a very short order the extent of Jesus's authority over pretty much every single aspect of human experience. This was an important thing for him to establish, that he wasn't just a good teacher. And his power wasn't just limited to healing a blind man or healing a broken leg. His power and his authority was much bigger than even the people who had experienced his incredible healing power. His authority and power, like the purview of what he's able to do, the things that he's in charge of, goes beyond what those people had experienced. I mean, right there, I could just pause and let us all consider that. That even all the things that you may have experienced Jesus do in your life, his authority goes even beyond those things that you have experienced. That is a very hopeful truth. Because what that means is that, like, if Jesus' power was limited to only the things that you had already experienced, what that would mean is, if you experience those things again, you can have hope in Jesus because he has authority over those things. But if you experience anything that you haven't experienced before, then you're kind of nervous. Does Jesus have authority in this kind of thing? Yes or no? So Mark chapter 5 shows us the extent of Jesus' authority. A theme that we're going to see here throughout each of these episodes, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. There's 4 successive episodes that happen one after another. A theme that we're going to see throughout all of them is that there is a limit to what man can do, and Jesus showed himself to be powerful beyond that limit. And please understand when I say man, I mean humankind. So the first one that I'm just going to touch on briefly because we have actually talked about this a couple times now, but it's the very end of Mark chapter 4. Jesus is in a boat with the disciples, and a big storm happens. Long story short, Jesus is asleep. Disciples wake him up. He calms the wind and the waves, and they're just like, what happened? A couple things I want to point out about this story. Number one, we know that the disciples, some of the disciples, were fishermen. I'm not sure how much Matthew was contributing towards the whole boating thing. I kind of figure I would be like a Matthew guy. Like, you guys got this? Like, this is your thing, right? Boats and waves and stuff? I don't know anything about this. It's like me putting on baseboards, like I think I broke something. I don't know. I broke the oar. They're like, it doesn't make a sound, dude. It's by hand. I'm like, what is this? There were disciples who were fishermen. Like they knew the sea. They knew how to get in a boat. They had experienced wind and waves before. And yet what they had experienced in that particular storm on that particular day was beyond what they were capable of doing. Jesus intervened. Jesus intervened in a way that wasn't just like, it wasn't just that he saved them. And I'm not trying to dismiss that or say that, it's no big deal. He saved them. He saved their lives. They said, we're going to die. And he saved their lives. But beyond that, what happened was the disciples looked at Jesus differently. Because they're like, even the wind and the sea obey him. And you could tell by the way that they're astonished by that they hadn't even considered that nature would be subject to the word of this man that they were following. Because again, they didn't really fully understand who Jesus was. So this was a very shocking thing for them to be like, even nature has to listen to you. You have authority even over those kinds of things. So these fishermen who were in way over their heads experienced Jesus come in and do what they couldn't do. Now, I want to make a distinction for all of us. This isn't to say that mankind can do nothing. And sometimes I feel when we have talked about how capable God is, how powerful God is, that there's sort of this idea that like man can do absolutely nothing. And that's inaccurate. That's inaccurate. These guys were fishermen. They did know how to sail a ship. They knew how to do that. But it's just that they experienced something that went beyond what they were capable of doing. So I don't want to make the mistake in saying that like humans are capable of nothing. That's not true. God created us to be actually quite capable of many things. But we all are going to experience things in life, whether it's right now or it's in the future, that goes beyond what we are capable of handling. And I think, as I kind of step back and I survey society that I know about, so that is to say, here in Santa Cruz, and we're back. I don't know how much time we lost, but I was literally talking about how technologically advanced we have become, and then the feed cut out, so I don't know. What does that mean? Nothing. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, we're back, guys. We're good. Guys in the back, we're good? Okay, all right. As I was saying, fishermen know how to fish. Okay. Humans are capable of many things. I see that as a part of God's design of how he made humans. I mean, if you think about it, God wasn't forced to create humans with the ability to create themselves. Like, he didn't have to do that. He could have just created a bunch of rocks, but he created humans who are capable of things. So it's not a bad thing that fishermen know how to fish, that construction workers know how to put in baseboard, and others don't. It's not a bad thing that society has been developing. So again, forgive me, I'm not sure if you caught this, but what I was saying when the lights were off is that as I step back and I look at our society, things have been progressing steadily. We're more technologically, medically, quality of life advanced than we were, certainly 2,000 years ago. I think that's probably a fact that nobody would argue. And that, I don't think that's like inherently a bad thing. I don't think God is like, oh no, you're using the brain that I created you with in order to make really cool gadgets. I don't think God is upset by that. There is a danger though, in having things be advanced so much and seeing human capability blossoming like it never has before. There is a danger in that. And the danger is in imagining we don't need God. The danger is in imagining that anything we will experience in the future, we will develop some sort of man-made response to that thing, and we'll be fine. In a way, I think that people express, now they wouldn't like this, they express faith in science based upon science's track record. In other words, hey, we have developed a cure for this thing and that thing, therefore I have every expectation that we'll be able to develop a cure for this thing or that thing. And while I hope that is true, please hear me say that super clearly. I hope that we do that. But it is not necessarily true that because we have advanced before, we will always advance in the future to tackle every single need that any human could ever come across. And that is where our need for a power and an authority that goes beyond our capability, it comes into focus. I don't know if it's because I studied science, I am a scientist, that I'm maybe a little bit sensitive about a claim that like humans can do nothing, because it's just not true. And I really enjoy the advance of science. I am praying for our scientists and our doctors right now with COVID-19 that they would quickly come up with a vaccine, a cure, some sort of clever scientific response to that. I'm praying for that. I hope that happens. But what my aim here in studying the life of Jesus is learning about the kinds of things that Jesus wants to teach us about life. And so there are going to be some storms, I put in air quotes, that our capability as fishermen, I put in air quotes again, we're going to be able to weather those storms. We are going to be able to navigate those wind and those waves. And that's not a bad thing. I don't think that's offensive to God. But again, let's not be in danger that just because we have been able to solve those problems, that means every single problem we ever could face as a human race, we will be able to solve those by ourselves as well. That also is not true. We need something beyond ourselves. I wonder if in this time when there's the complexity of our need around the world is pretty intense right now. There obviously are physical needs that we have. People are getting sick. There's financial needs that people have. There are emotional needs that people have. And as I'm seeing the web of need grow and grow, I'm thinking, okay, Lord, what opportunity is there for you to be glorified, for you to show yourself as a God who has authority over these things so that people would really understand, wow, God, you are the one that has all authority in the heavens and the earth, and even the wind and the sea need to obey you. Well, that brings me to Mark chapter 5. We're going to get all the way through it. We're going to do it. I would like to say for the record that the power cut out for about 60 seconds, so I'm going to take those extra 60 seconds. Mark chapter 5. Okay, I am going to kind of blitz through the rest of this because I'm going to rock skip across the surface of the lake of this chapter, because the point that I want to make isn't so much about the details, it's about the successive experiences that the disciples had as they were following Jesus. It began with Jesus literally saying to nature, "Stop it," and it did. And then they come to the country of the Gerasenes. And there was a man that we kind of know him as the Gerasene demoniac. What a horrible way to be known. But that's, anyway, how we know him. And they get off the boat, and this poor man immediately comes from the tomb. And what we understand from the scriptures is that he had what the Bible calls an unclean spirit. He had a demonic possession, and he was tortured in the extreme by this. So what's interesting to me about this story in the context of what we're talking about here, though, is that many people in that country, in that town, they had tried to do what they could to help this man. And then having given up on helping him, they just tried to restrain him. They tried to put chains on him. They tried to bind him up. But it says that no one was able to bind him anymore. That there wasn't anybody who was strong enough to contain and restrain or even help this poor man cope with what they had basically concluded. I don't know what's going on here. We can't help you. And the best thing we can do is like chain you down. That's the best thing we can come up with. Because it talks about how he was hurting himself. And I have to imagine that they were concerned that he might hurt other people. Very chaotic, unpredictable, and obviously torturing this poor man. So again, I want to be careful that we don't mock these people at that time. We don't mock their efforts at trying to help him. That we don't, having the benefit of being able to read the story, we know what was going on with the man, that he had not just one demon, but he had a legion of demons. That we don't, have like a mocking spirit, like, oh, those ridiculous people. How could they not know that? I don't know. I put myself in that same situation, and without discernment from the Holy Spirit, I don't think I would be able to know that that man was tortured by a legion of demons. But what I see is people doing their best to try to help somebody out. That's good. That's good. But they came to the end of what they were able to do. Certainly, they weren't able to solve his problem, but they weren't even able to help him cope with the problem. Again, if I kind of take 1,000 steps back and I look at our society, I see many efforts going on where we've kind of given up in a way. We've given up trying to solve the root of the problem, and most of our efforts in helping people are helping them cope with their new reality. Please don't hear me mock that. I'm not mocking it. I think that's great that people would want to be helping people. But in the name of wanting to help people, let's not accidentally get caught up in pride that would prevent us from coming to Jesus, who can not even just help people cope, but who can actually address the root of what is causing them so much torture. So Jesus came and he cast out these demons in spectacular fashion. It's one of my favorite stories because in my Bible I wonder if you can see this. You see my writing there? I wrote, "Why bother with the sheep?" Because he cast them out into a herd of swine. And then I realized swine are not sheep. And so in my Bible, I had to cross out sheep and write pigs next to it. It's just a good reminder to stay humble. It's just, like I teach the Bible with regularity and I had to cross out sheep. Swine are not sheep. Baseboards are hard. I just a lot of personal growth happening in my life. So he casts out the demon into a herd of swine, and the swine jump off a cliff. So it kind of tells us the degree to which people are tortured. So Jesus was able to do things. He has authority over unseen things. He has authority over afflictions that we don't even know how to name. We don't even know what to do about that. And the best thing that we can try to do, help people kind of cope with their new reality, even when that is failing. Jesus can come in and he has authority over those things. Okay, so he goes on from there and he meets a man named Jairus. And Jairus was talking to Jesus about his daughter. And what he says is, in verse 23, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her that she may get well and live." Where Jairus met Jesus was kind of far away from where his daughter was, and so Jesus had to travel from when he first talked to Jairus and then going to where the daughter was. Well, on his way, there was a throng of people around Jesus, and a lot of people kind of bumping into one another as you might do in a crowded street. And there was a woman that we read about who had internal hemorrhaging for years and years, and that she had availed herself of what it says of many physicians, and that she spent all the money that she had to try to get well. But it says in verse 26 that she was not helped at all, and furthermore, she had gotten worse. It says that she suffered much at the hand of many physicians, And, I'm not sure that means that, like, she talked to unscrupulous physicians or something like that were taking her for a ride. It might mean that the fatigue of trying to figure out a medical problem and not finding answers again and again and again and again, spending money every single time, draining yourself of energy, draining yourself of vitality, and draining yourself of your finances, is a slow kind of torture. So we don't know, but all we know is that this woman wasn't getting better. She was getting worse. And now, she doesn't even really have any money to avail herself of any more medical help. Again, let's not criticize or mock the fact that she was going to physicians. If you're sick, you should go to a physician. That's what you should be doing. The theme here is not man can do nothing. The theme here is there are things man cannot do. And Jesus intervened in those moments, not just for the sake of that healing or that episode to cause the wind and the waves to calm down or to deliver that man of that demonic oppression. It wasn't just for that purpose. It also was for the purpose of showing the world that Jesus has authority over things that we don't have authority over. And that can bring us to a place of great and abiding hope. So she thought to herself, if I just touch his garments, I shall get well. And immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. And then Jesus said, who touched my garments? And the disciples, are just total bros. Like, what do you mean? Like, there's a bunch of people touching you. And he's like, no. I felt the power go out from me. Something significant happened. And then there was the woman there. And he just has a really tender moment with her. He says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. It's kind of interesting that he says that, like, go in peace and be healed of your affliction, because it says that she already was healed. I think there's something significant about the voice of Jesus Christ speaking to you, even beyond whatever physical or emotional or circumstantial need that you have. Because, I don't know, in our haste to want to have things return to the way that they kind of normally are, which in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but in our haste to wanting things to return to the way that they are, we can sort of like say, hey, thanks, Jesus, for what you did, and then kind of forget it as we return to normalcy. But I don't want to do that. I want to have the voice of Jesus kind of ping-ponging around in my heart and my soul, so that the thing that he did to touch my life stays with me even after the need has evaporated because of what he did. And in that way, I think we can kind of maintain this posture of recognizing that he has authority, and he also is very tender toward us who call upon his name. He is both powerful and gentle. Well, after that, Jesus goes to the house where the daughter of Jairus was sick, and they tell him it's too late. She died. And Jesus overhears what people were talking about, and he says in verse 36, do not be afraid any longer, only believe. And then he allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house, and there was a big commotion. And he says, the child has not died, actually, but is just asleep. And look at this, in verse number 40, and they began laughing at him. Laughing at him. Another horrible way to be known in the scriptures. Oh yeah, I was the person that laughed at Jesus when he said that he was going to do something. But I wonder how many times that has kind of been my attitude toward the Lord, like, right. Because let me tell you a thing or two, Jesus, about what I know, okay? What I know as reality is this. And I know you're saying that. That's nice. But here's where we're living. Jesus at times will come into our lives and say, you actually don't understand the circumstance as well as you think that you do. So he comes in and he puts everybody out. And I really like that because he wasn't trying to make what he was about to do with this poor little girl some sort of show. You know, he wasn't trying to be the magic man. He wasn't trying to be, I don't know, like glorify himself in a way that would be very fleshly, that would be very, selfish. But he put all of them out and he goes into the room. He takes a child by the hand and says, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately, true to the Gospel of Mark, I passed over so many immediatelys in the story. They're in there, word wealth. Immediately the girl rose and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. She was 12 years old. And immediately they were completely astounded. I mean, come on, I would be too, right? I would be too. So Jesus ends this succession of miracles, tackling what we all would consider the most difficult of the things that he did, and that is to say that he tackled death itself. So I just want to review. He has authority over nature. He has authority over the spiritual realm, the demonic. He has authority over physical needs, even those that go beyond what doctors might be able to do, what doctors understand. And he has authority even over death itself. So I'm looking at the survey and I'm thinking, that's a pretty complete resume. I don't know that I can really think of anything else that lies outside of those bookends. And so then what it is that I might be experiencing, I think can fit within the space of each of those things, those kind of four corners, as it were. That what I might be going through now, I have confidence after reading this that Jesus has authority over those things. Where do we go from here, though? And don't say Mark chapter 6, because we don't have time for that. Although if you wanted to stick around for a little bit, maybe we could get... No, let's not do it. What we don't see after this episode, we don't see Jesus going around and raising every single person from the dead. Isn't that kind of curious? It's like, oh my gosh, you can raise people from the dead? Why aren't you doing that everywhere? We see him walking out the fulfillment of the greater purpose that he came to do. And as amazing as it is that Jesus can tell wind to stop, that he can, by someone just touching his garment, cause internal bleeding to stop, as miraculous and as incredible that is, his greater purpose was to die so that we all could live. That was the greater purpose of why he came. He did not come to be a miracle machine. He came to bring forgiveness of our sins. Now, I'm not saying that he doesn't do those kinds of miracles to heal, to change circumstance, because he does do that. But it would be a huge mistake to myopically focus only on the circumstantial things that you think Jesus can do in your life without considering the bigger picture of what he can do in your life as well. He came to reconcile us with the Father. That is really the biggest goal. Now here's where things just get even crazier, is we learn later on in the New Testament that you and I, who have received that forgiveness of Jesus Christ, that we have been born again, That we are living the new life right now that Jesus promised us. We're doing that. Not only do we get to live a new life, but he also has given us his ministry, which is to say that my purpose, your purpose, isn't just to help people resolve the challenges that they have in their life, though we want to be used to do that. Our biggest purpose is to reconcile the world to the Father. He has given us the same ministry. It's yours. It's mine. We get to do that now. So I want to talk to you about a mindset that I see in Jesus that I think I can adopt in this time. Our world is experiencing need in a way that I just don't think we have in my lifetime. I just don't think we have. Which means that there might be opportunity for me to be used by God to do the kinds of things that I see Jesus doing. In other words, be used by the power of the Holy Spirit to intervene and intercede on behalf of people who have need, to pray for them, and to have their life be turned around. Again, not just so that their life would be turned around, but so that they could understand that there is a God who loves them. It's really important, I think, that we have those two kind of things in mind, that as we're praying for our world, as we're praying for people to be healed, that we also are praying that God would be glorified in the midst of that. Because whatever it is they need to be healed of, they also need to be healed of the sin in their life so that ultimately, eternally, they can be healed. But I've been thinking about especially the financial ramifications that our city, and I think no matter where you're tuning in from, your city as well, will likely be experiencing in the months to come. The amount of small businesses that may shutter, the amount of workers who can't even afford to pay rent because they can't go into work because of, shelter in place, or they're sick or something like that. And I've been praying about that. God, is there anything that we can do? And I don't have some sort of big answer. I don't have some sort of big campaign that I want to introduce us to because I don't know. But not knowing has brought me to the Lord saying, God, I want to bring this to you. I want to bring this to you. But I do want to mention one thing that I think could be the beginnings of something where we can maybe help out in a little way, practically, and a big way spiritually. If this fits within your budget and you can do so safely and complying with all of the orders of your local government, Lindsay and I have tried to do takeout from our favorite local restaurants like once a week or at least once a month as a way of just practically wanting to help out these businesses that are seeing their revenue, go way down. And recognizing that restaurants are not just like there's humans involved, there's workers, there's owners. And it's just put this totally different perspective in my mind that there are people that might be hurting behind this tasty food that I really love. And if there's a little way that I can contribute towards that by doing takeout when maybe we didn't have to, that could be a really practical way where we can begin reaching out to our community. But I want to take a step beyond that. So doing takeout, that's really nice. But what if in our church, every time anyone in our church got takeout, we prayed for the workers and the owners of that restaurant? We prayed blessing on them. We prayed healing on them. We prayed wholeness on them. We prayed for their business financially for them. Whether the owners know it or not, whether the workers know it or not, maybe there's an opportunity to, pray for them 6 feet away. But maybe it's just a private thing. Maybe it's something they never know about. But that can be a way where we can begin tapping into the authority that Jesus has and the power that he has that goes beyond the $10 or whatever we're spending on the takeout. See, that's a way that I want to adopt what I see Jesus doing and be a simple believer in the power of God. So maybe my one meal won't make the difference for them, but maybe my prayer will. And how much can we intercede on behalf of our community and make that a regular thing so we are blessing them and not just passing by the need that we see around us? And as it were, there's tortured people all around us. It might just not be as obvious as it was for that poor man who came at the feet of Jesus with all those demons. It might not be as obvious as that, but make no mistake, I think there's a lot of tortured people around us. And what I learned from Jesus is that we can do something about it. And it starts with going to the one who can. This ministry is ours now. This thing we read about Jesus doing, it's ours to do on his behalf. We are the body of Christ, after all. So let's do that. Let's do that. Well, we did it. Mark chapter 5, okay? If you didn't believe in miracles, I offer that one to you right now. I hope that gives you some helpful perspective of how you can be going out in our community safely, again, in accordance with what our local governments are asking us to do. Let's comply by all of those things. But there's a way that we can entreat the Lord on behalf of our community and our loved ones. All right? Well, that's it for this morning. Thank you for tuning in here, either live or later on in YouTube. We love you. We want to know if there's anything we can do for you. Please email info@coastlands.org. Please remember to tithe, and we'll see you next week. Well, I won't really see you, but you'll see me next week. Same time, same channel.